Hey S7s, it's Mr. CHEN-KE here. In this video, I want to introduce you guys to the two key literary concepts of setting and imagery. But before we begin, I want to pose a challenge. On the following slides, there are 5 pictures of iconic settings. Now, some of these settings are from really famous movies, some are from really famous novels. Maybe some of these images could also be real-life locations that we find pop up in a lot of famous film, literature, and art. I'm going to show each image of each iconic setting on the screen for about 5 to 10 seconds, and I want you guys to grab a pen, grab your workbooks out, and see if you can name each of these following iconic settings. Here is iconic setting number 1. Can you tell me what the name of the setting is, where it is perhaps, and maybe what text this setting is from? Remember, it could be a movie, it could be a book, it could be a graphic novel, it could even be a real life location. Alright, this is image number 2. What story is this from? Where is it, and what's the name of this iconic setting? Alrighty, moving on to setting number 3. I love this one. It looks really quite grand and sort of intense, but also looks quite bleak and quite scary as well. The grey colours definitely give off a really weird sort of bleak vibe. Alright, iconic setting number 4. There's a big clue in the top left-hand corner of this image as to where this setting might be and what text it is from. And finally, iconic setting number 5. Can you name this location? Can you name this setting? Perhaps, can you name some stories that are set in this location? Alright, so before we actually get to analysing the setting of Same Sun Here, and in general, what we need to do is develop an idea of how to define setting. So when we look at setting through the lens of literature and literary analysis in English, it usually refers to where and when a story or a scene takes place. Now, the where can be a real place, like New York City or Kentucky. Like in Same Sun Here, those are probably the 2 primary settings. Or it can be an imagined location, like Hogwarts in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. The when can be a real time period, so it could be a story set in the past or the present. So a lot of historical movies about like world wars would be set in the past. A lot of novels, TV series, movies would be set in the present day. Or the when can also be an imagined sort of time period, perhaps in the future. So a lot of sci-fi, supernatural, fantastical stories are often set in an imagined future. The creators of these texts often give us like a little prediction as to what the world might look like in 10, 20, 30 years. So in summary, setting refers to where and when a story or a scene takes place. When we analyse a text setting or story setting, it's also important to consider its social, historical, and political context. So you want to ask yourself those questions in the 3 dot points. So what's society like in the story? What is or was society like during the time and place where the story is set? What historical period is the story setting, and why is this important or significant? And how does the politics of the time impact the story's plot, characters, and themes? In the top right-hand corner, I've pasted a picture of the 2008 Barack Obama campaign poster. This is now an iconic political poster, and I've included this image because we know in Same Sun Here, Mina especially talks a lot about Barack Obama being the first person of colour to be a president in America, and how that gives her hope, and how it is the first step in a longer, broader journey against combating racism, prejudice, and discrimination. So The society of a story, the historical background, and the political context, all these different elements impact the story setting as well. Finally, a lot of other elements or variables impact or determine a story setting, such as the landscape. In Halls, we had this sort of barren, desert-like landscape, which really gave the setting of the story a really distinct vibe. Also, the architecture, so the way that buildings and different infrastructure are built and designed, definitely impacts the setting of the story. The time of day as well impacts the setting of the story, and it also impacts the mood and the atmosphere that the setting elicits. For example, if you were to set a story at nighttime versus by the day, there's definitely a different emotional impact and mood that creates. And also the weather definitely determines the setting as well. Now, this is the second concept that I want to introduce to you guys today, and it's called imagery. So when we're reading a story, we may visualize what a scene or what a specific setting looks like in our heads as if it was playing out in front of us like a movie. And we've talked a little bit about visualization this year. When we're reading stories, it's really important for us to try to visualize what's going on. Now, the language that the author uses to tell the story has to be descriptive enough, and it has to include imagery so we can bring these visualizations and these visions to life. If a story cannot really be visualized as we're reading it, and if we can't visualize the characters, the settings, then it's probably not going to be a very good story to read. So that's where this concept of imagery becomes really important. So imagery is when the author uses language that taps into our 5 senses. So by describing how things and people look, taste, smell, feel, and sound like, so by really eliciting and targeting those 5 senses, we can bring experiences from books to life. So what you'll find when you're reading Same Sun Here, and really any other text, is that authors often use language that is targeting our 5 senses. So sight, what we can see. You might find a sentence like this in the story. The tiny red ant climbed up the broken twig. Authors also target our sense of smell. So you might read a sentence like, the sweet smell of the freshly baked apple filled the air, and you can almost visualize that scene in your head. And that's the same for sound. The car squeaked every time I hit a bump in the road. That really helps us sort of visualize and hear and almost bring that image of the car braking to life. And also taste and touch are really important senses as well. So every time writers and authors use descriptions or use language that includes one or more of our 5 senses, that is what we refer to as imagery. So here's your activity that I want you guys to do for me today. I want you guys to think of a novel, a graphic novel, so it could be a manga, or a film, or movie, or even a TV series that you have read or viewed recently. And I want you to handwrite a short paragraph, about 100 words, in your exercise books, describing the setting of that particular story that you have in mind. And I want you to consider the story's use of imagery. If I was to be transported or teleported into the setting of the story that you're describing, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would I hear? What would it sound like? What could I taste? And what would it smell like? Okay, that is your job for me today, Year 7s. Please have this paragraph ready to go by tomorrow's lesson, because on Friday we're going to begin our lesson on Zoom by sharing some of our paragraphs. Hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. As always, if you have a question, email me or comment on Google Classroom. But I'm really looking forward to reading these paragraphs, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Alright, thanks Year 7s. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.